Welcome to the Relationships Inside Out podcast with Doctors Gregory Siebert and Kimberly Murray, licensed marriage and family therapists. Join them on this journey as they explore the ins and outs of relationships.
All right. So this is our holiday episode for Relationships Inside Out, our first, because it's our only second episode. So this is a really important time of year for both on a good side and happy side, but also a very trouble or difficult time for many people. So I think this is a great episode to have to draw from our perspectives. Again, just our perspectives as clinicians, researchers, of what we could do, what we can think about to maybe help this go a little bit easier, smoother for some people.
Yeah, it's so complicated. It's complicated to balance the joy and the pain that the holidays can bring, and how that gets infinitely more complicated when we add a partner or children to the mix. And so I'm hoping we can give at least a few tips to make it a better holiday season for some individuals, couples, and families.
Biggest tip, don't be the person that brings in the hot topics, politics, vaccines.
Oh, why not?
Religion.
Oh, why not? I know that goes well in my house. No, not at all.
So before we get, I think that kind of speaks to boundaries, which are kind of our expectations and guiding us to a little bit about what to expect and how to respond when things go certain ways. I mean, we can't predict everything, but to have some sort of idea of, for our family unit, what does this look like? How do we go into there, especially for couples, as a unified front so we can support each other if it becomes difficult or stressful? So I think this is, for me, one of the top things for families or individual couples to think about is what are our boundaries?
Totally agree. Those just get magnified over the holidays.
Yeah.
And they can ebb and flow. And I think allowing for this dialogue to happen every year, not just once in our relationship, that's the pattern we follow from here on out, but allowing it to ebb and flow based on needs of the household, based on even COVID stuff, right?
Yeah.
Or kids, but continually having this dialogue of how do we as how do I as an individual, or we as a couple or a family, navigate the holidays so we can have the best possible time that we can. And
navigate the times that might not go so well. Again, with a crazy aunt or uncle who's bringing in the topics. I did have something. My wife I thought this was very interesting, but she's like, we were watching on TV and there was a commercial that came on about like a truck, $50,000 something truck. It's like, surprise your loved one. And she turns to me and she's like, in what world would somebody actually go spend that money without talking to their partner?
Truth.
And I was like, that's very true. So here's this media saying, go do these things and not communicate about finances.
And it's just perpetuated. But that's also the standards we come to know, right? By consumption of media or with our friends. And so how do we also adjust our expectations so that they're reasonable, so that they're healthy for the holiday season? Are we expecting the $50,000 truck? Or
yes, every year.
Can we just expect to try to get along 80% of the time, right? What is actually reasonable, and how do we achieve that reasonable goal?
Yeah. And it all starts with being able to communicate about what each other's needs are. I mean, especially like in a couple unit, right? You are going to your spouses or partners' families. They know a lot of the intricacies, expectations, things that might serve as a trigger for them. And I think these are the things that need to be communicated in terms of, hey, I have this one aunt or uncle, or my mom, right? Or this parent or family member does X, Y, and Z. This tends to do this for me, or it might do this for you. How would you like to approach that or respond to that if we do that?
Love that. My partner and I, we have a series of hand signals I hate to give away.
I hope your family's not watching this.
Give away our signals here. And I even use them with my sister, and I do them too. But we will say porcupine to one another, or we'll say yellow if you're thinking green, yellow, red. And that's our cue of, hey, someone's got to take a break here. If we say porcupine, it means I want us to break together. Yellow for us is, hey, I'm noticing you're escalating. How do we get it so that you're more comfortable and de-escalated?
Yeah.
And that really helps us. We also have, like, if I give him a firm squeeze on his arm or things of that nature, where it can give him a clue that, hey, I'm not feeling good, or I'm noticing you're not feeling good. Yeah. Let's shift.
Has anyone ever been, hey, why'd you say porcupine in the middle of that sentence? Or
surprisingly, it's not porcupine that they catch. It's yellow.
Yellow.
A few people have caught that, but never porcupine. And you think that would be the one, but
so what do they say to you when they caught yellow? Like what happened?
I've had a couple where they're like, yellow. What's yellow? And I just say, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about
You're
it.
like yellow, like hello. It's just our way of being cute.
And it works great for us because then we're a united front. No matter who else is in the room, no matter if there's tension or stress, I know my partner is there with me and I'm there with him. And including our kids, right? We're there for our kids, and it gives us the chance to say, hey, this isn't feeling good for my body.
Yeah.
I need to change something in some way.
And I like that because it gets a sense of like a unified front. We're in this together, a sense of safety. We're not just throwing our partners into the wolves to our families.
Truth.
Right. Just especially like a new couples, like, here's my family, bye, and not feeling any sense of support or, you know, you're left to go interact with my grandpa over there. So good luck.
What about for you and your partner? How do you guys navigate being a united front in what can be a stressful period of time?
We have conversations before of what to expect. Like, you know, my family doesn't tend to make decisions, you know, very efficiently sometimes. So, you know, what do you see our role in that? I mean, even the basics, like, are we buying presents for people?
Truth.
Like, so are we on the same page for that? Not like one person buying presents and you show up and you're like, oh, did we buy? Was that you that gave that gift? Yeah. Oh, okay. Again, communicating, like, that probably falls into the finances too, but just trying to be on the same page of, and even I think time spent. Right. How much time do you want to spend there? Or you think, because, you know, my wife's very introverted. She tends to rejuvenate.
Just like me.
Yeah. So she rejuvenates when she's by herself. Right. So when social settings become stressful, and really talking about, hey, like, this is a lot. And in some of the facial expressions, I've kind of tuned in with her a little bit more as well. But that's kind of how
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And it gives room for nuance, because sometimes, and maybe for Taylor, sometimes she feels more energetic and around people. I know that's true for me.
Yeah.
And there are times that I go and I thought I could do it, thought I wanted to do it. And I get there and I'm like, ooh, this is a lot. Yeah. So being able to communicate that, but also have our exit strategy of when one or both of us or our kids are capped out, how do we execute that in a way that's still respectful of the people there, still honors both of our needs? It's a hard dance, but it's an important one.
So just as a question with kids, do you often use them as kind of the reason we got to go?
If my family's watching, no. If I'm being truthful, yes.
we'll usually leave Bella home and we're like, we got to go and feed her. Right. My
dog.
Yeah. Our fur baby. Yeah.
Not a child.
Yeah. Our fur baby. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And honestly, for them, they do have a cap that's even probably shorter than mine. And I recognize, like, my husband, he can handle people much longer than I can. I like one-on-one, but big groups, not my forte.
Not your forte. And
I thought my threshold was low, but our kids might even be a little lower.
Yeah.
They get overstimulated just like adults do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's an important factor to consider in terms of the boundaries is how are we going to respond to the kids? Who's going to respond to them? And in what way? And if we can't come to a decision, how are we going to navigate this in this context of family, right?
And setting everyone up for success. So one of our big things before we do holiday stuff, even if we know food's going to be there, everyone gets a snack before we go. Everyone gets a nap if we can before we go, especially the kids. Everybody gets some sort of calm or chill time before we go. So that when we go in, we're our best self. We're rested, we're fed. The kids have gone to the bathroom, like all the things, so that we can set them up for success and set our relationship up for success.
That's smart. So you don't end up at the party hangry.
Been there and done it and
or the kids
it.
hangry.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I think as we're talking, something came up for me was even talking about whose house it's at that year.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of conflict about who's hosting it. And I've done it for so many years, like I love traditions, right? And as new family units get developed, right? We're having kids and then they're having kids and they're wanting to start a tradition and just navigating which day are we doing it? But there's some resentment that gets built around there, right? Some people have this really strong need to keep this tradition. And how do you navigate that? What do you want to do?
What do you and your wife do? How do you guys balance out your families?
So I think because I've moved around a lot recently in the last couple we did in the last couple of years, or 5 years, we tend to kind of gauge it on how much time we spent with the family who's closest. So
like in proximity, distance?
Yeah. So in Florida, we tend to do Thanksgiving all the time because we were just there, right? So then we would come here to Colorado for Christmas. And now we plan to go back there for Christmas. Although this year we did spend time in Hawaii with them. So we're probably not going to go this year since we already seen them, but it's really about how much time you spend and where, and try to really balance that out. Luckily for us, I mean, both our families are very tolerable, right? We're not having this conversation of this is going to be tough.
That's good.
So we're blessed in that
That's a blessing.
Yeah. Which isn't always the case for everybody, which is, especially with those who might not even have family around right now, or.
It can be so tough of thinking about what are our needs? What do we most enjoy? But what are the needs of the people around us? How do we honor their needs, perhaps give them time towards their needs, but not do it to our detriment all the time? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough. And honoring both the spaces of joy and the spaces of grief. So I know for our household, one thing we have to consider that maybe is unique in some ways. We lost my mom 4.5 years ago. And now my dad is widowed. And it's a really conscious process every year of how do we acknowledge that he is alone? How do we give space to talk about my mom, to let him and all of us feel our feels, and still try to find the joy in our holiday season, and still keep him included when it feels good for him in his space.
Yeah. And I think it's an important topic you're bringing up, because a lot of times we talk about it with our family, like how we're going to deal with this, but why not just talk to the person and ask them what they need?
Such a good point.
How are they going through this? What can I do to best support you in this time? What is this? What do you want this holiday to look like for you? So we can best support. Because a lot of times we just assume based on what our own needs are, but people are different. They have different perceptions, and really checking in with them so we don't really set ourselves up for failure, and helping support them the best we can.
And I really do think of it like a dance of we can ask, and also being okay with sometimes we may ask or they may ask, and being able to say no at the same time.
Yeah.
And that goes back to that boundaries of even when someone's in grief and mourning, we can still have boundaries. Even when someone is stressed or angry, we can still hold boundaries. You can both love a person and have boundaries. And in fact, if you truly love them, boundaries are a healthy and totally appropriate thing.
Yeah. And setting them initially, right? Setting the boundary of, I don't think this year we're going to spend the Christmas there. We're going to go to another family. It can be hurtful to start with, but once you spent time doing that and set an expectation of that boundary, it becomes a lot easier. But initially it is tough. And I think that's where a lot of hesitation is how do I let my family know that I don't want to be there right now, or I don't want them to come to our house to use our rooms or anything to stay the night. We just kind of need our space this year. We've had a tough year, COVID or whatever the reasons are for individuals.
And being able to negotiate a different way, right? So even our family, there was a lot of discussion about how we'd handle Christmas Day this year, because we have a little, she's not a baby anymore, she's a toddler, and a 4-year-old, and people in our family obviously want to be around them and around us, hopefully, but especially them. And being able to say no was really difficult because it didn't fit with our family, with my husband's job and working on Christmas, and with just our needs for connection as a family right now. It's hard to say no, but on the backside, it'll serve our family better, right? And it feels good for our family.
Yeah.
And it takes some practice.
Yeah. And how did this conversation come up for you guys? Like, because I'm thinking for those listening, how do you best even start the conversation about boundaries?
Ooh, good question. I think for us personally, and then I'm curious how you do it. For us personally, because we moved back to where we are, there's a hope every holiday we get together as a whole family, and we've done that for the last several years. And
when you say back to where you are, you mean like
in Colorado,
closest to family, right? Yeah.
And this year we knew prior during the summer, we were just saying like, we can't do Christmas.
Yeah.
And so we actually told our families back in September the first time, and then had to hold that boundary a few times over since then. And it was hard. Not everyone loves that choice. And I still stand by, I think it's a good move for our family. It allows our girls to relax on Christmas.
Yeah.
Enjoy Santa, allows my husband and I to focus on our marriage. And then we pivot, right? So we'll see them on the 26th and the 27th.
And that's setting that boundary. And I love how you said focus on our marriage, because this is really a time of giving, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of people. And in that giving, we often forget about ourselves. And I think that's what those boundaries are really helping, is how do you protect yourselves and your family unit in this time and give to us, right? By setting boundaries.
Yes.
And that's what, my wife and I will talk about a lot is, where are you at right now? Just emotionally, like how are you feeling about the holidays? Where's your energy? Like what's this going to look like for you? What do you want it to look like? And we may not always agree, but I think the most important thing is really understanding where each other are at in that process, with the goal of setting boundaries to prioritize our relationship in a time that's very much about giving. And I think there's nothing wrong with giving to ourselves, right?
I love that. And thinking about what does our partner need, asking them. My husband and I just distinguish between needs and wants. Is this something I just want that sounds really good? Or is this something I need at my core level?
I need that
$50,000 truck. But there are moments when, I'll say like, hey, I want this. And he'll say, hey, but I need this. And need for us in our house trumps wants. And so it may require compromise and pivoting my perspective for my partner. So that's okay.
I'm going to throw you this question. And I know we're going to talk about this in a podcast when we go really delve into communication. What is that reciprocity? How do you ensure reciprocity? And by that, I mean balance, right? Because I feel at certain times, and this is okay, right? But certain times one partner might need more, one family member might need more, and that times more needs. And how do you balance that when the other partner's kind of, or family member is kind of attending to those needs, right? The best they can, but then they're not getting their needs met, right?
Good question. So back to my mom, in the period prior to her death, my needs, and it sounds kind of bad, but they trumped all other needs in that moment. And the weeks prior to her death, as well as the weeks after. And my husband was truly amazing at giving me the space to grieve. And he took care of, we only had one at the time, took care of our oldest and put his needs to the side. As I was coming out of grief, it was a discussion of, hey, this is something I'm needing or something I've been missing. And we could negotiate that. This year, some of his family is sick. And so how do I then selflessly give like he did to accommodate for the connection he's needing for the people in his life who are sick? And so being able to have that dialogue, not a tit for tat of, well, I did it for you, now do it for me, but how do we give space for both of us to process through whatever challenges we're going through, have room to do that? And it's not always a pretty process. It's not always easy, but I think the open dialogue is the most important part.
And a couple of things I think you brought up that are key is one, they need to let us know what they need, or we need to let each other know.
Yes.
We might not know they need extra
support.
No
one's a mind reader.
The other thing is time perspective. Oftentimes when we're the ones needing or giving, I guess, for that matter, we think it's just so imbalanced. But this does oscillate with time, right? Again, as you said, now your husband is kind of dealing with some stuff with the family, right? So now you're in a place to provide support, which, not all the times is everyone in a place. What if both are kind of really struggling? And that's where it's really,
that gets really tricky.
And that's where it's important to really get down with each other on a very vulnerable level and really talk about, this is what I am needing. This is what you're needing. How do we best support each other? Because kind of like the idea of love languages, I think support's in the same way. We have ways to feel supported, but if we really don't let each other know, and especially in those moments, because they could change, we're just providing the support based on how we think best fits, and it may not be effective for them.
And holidays, I think, is a time where change happens rather quickly, right? So if, like, I could be enjoying Christmas. We went through this yesterday. We were enjoying Christmas music and different things. And then I hung up my mom's tree ornament. And you don't think about it, but then it sucker punches you, right? So then I'm back into grief and attuning to one another. So then my husband noticed, oh, hey, something's amiss here. So being able to attune with your partner, being able to talk about it openly and allowing for the ebb and flow for both partners, but also leaning on the rest of your support system. So if both of you are struggling, or even if you're doing well, recognizing our partners aren't our only support system. Relationships also look like friendships, family relationships. For me, relationship with God, whatever it might be. Being able to lean on the multitude of relationships at our disposal, I think is really important, especially during the holidays.
And I love that you say that, because I think one factor in trying to really understand what those boundaries are is, what did you just say? Sorry, I lost track of my thought.
You're okay. That happens.
What was it you just said about
leaning on relationships and the multitude of them?
A very important conversation in boundaries. Being who you think is okay to lean on, your partner may not want you to disclose to them. This is part of that discussion that needs to happen of, is it okay if I talk to my sister or whoever? If we can't, navigate it right now, or you're not present in the time we're at this, holiday party, who do you feel comfortable with me disclosing to, and to what detail? Because a lot of people have different ideas of what that means in terms of boundaries. You might get a partner who's very rigid, and they don't want to disclose anything, very private. Another one is very collectivist in the sense of, everything we talk about, everything is my family's extended and all.
Good point. Being able to negotiate that. So much of what we're talking about here is that negotiation. And I feel like the holidays are just like a pressure cooker of negotiation. How do we decide, as you brought up earlier, gifts? How much do we spend? Do we buy gifts? Who are we buying gifts for? Is it a negotiation of time? Where are we? How long are we there? Is it a negotiation of Christmas PJs and which ones we're going to pick? Whatever it might be.
Not these. My wife picked these.
0 to 5 star rating on those?
0 to 5 star. They say large, but they're kind of built like Danny DeVito large, right? Like not length.
But even like the littlest details, sometimes as couples, we don't talk about those little details, and that ends up biting us later.
Yeah. Or just assuming, right? Sliding into the holidays without even making any decisions of what this is going to look like. I know I've used that language a lot. What is this going to look like? But that is an important question. What is it going to look like for you and me? So we're on the same page for expectations.
So if you had to give people, partners, families, a couple useful tips, what would you suggest to make this holiday the best holiday they can make it?
I think, kind of what we've talked about so far. One is, how are we going to give, right? If that's what we decide as a family, but also prioritize ourselves. So I think in the midst of all this, to schedule a time for your family or your relationship unit or for yourself to go do something for you.
I love
that. To
that.
rejuvenate. How about for you?
Ooh, good question.
We can just kind of spitball back and forth.
I think really embracing the word no at a time that is so built on giving, we forget that we still have autonomy. We still have the ability to say no. We still have a threshold of tolerance that we have to honor. And when we don't, it leads to stress, fighting, you name it. And those are the Christmases people look back and say, man, that one really sucked.
Yeah.
And so being able to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I always forget about that. Right. I think a lot of us forget about that. Even being trained in this field, we forget about the importance of no. And I think some of it comes to the aversion of, we don't want conflict. This is supposed to be a time of, being happy and merry. And I think that's one reason that a lot of people don't want to discuss anything that's controversial, which is what I would say is another important kind of thing to do, or tip, is ask each other before you go into this stuff, whatever household, each one you go to, if you're going to multiple family parties or whatever it might be, what do you want this one to look like? And what are you going to need from me? I noticed your tax from last time. Do you want me to take more of the this time? So having that discussion is a necessity, in my opinion.
Another one that actually a client had shared with me was, we pick, I think she said 4 events that we do for the Christmas season in their household. So from Thanksgiving to Christmas, we get 4 events. That's either 4 holiday parties or winter festival or whatever it might be. But they only pick 4. Instead of trying to say yes to everything, they are really intentional about how they spend that time, so that every weekend, every night isn't spent wearing themselves out. Yeah. And so they set a limit, and I actually really love that.
Boundary.
Yeah.
Setting that boundary
of, we wish we could do all these things. And for our family, that doesn't feel authentic. That doesn't feel good.
That leads really well into what the next one I had in mind was, you have your tradition on a larger scale, right? If you're blessed to have extended family and you're going to these, is to set up a tradition for your own little family unit.
What is one for you and Taylor?
We like to go on a Christmas hike with our dog.
I freaking love that.
We just want our three little, like our fur baby and us two to go hike. And
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
How about for you? If you guys don't have one, what would it be?
Ooh, this year we're really starting to tap into, I think my husband and I just yesterday and the day before, how do we want Christmas to look this year? Because now our daughter's 4 and she's starting to really be present and intentional in the holiday too.
Especially with her presents.
Oh, yes. She jokes that she has 3 Christmas lists. Oh, I love her. For us, we talked about like Christmas Eve night, letting her sleep in our bed. That is one privilege she loves in our house. And so letting her sleep in our bed. Mm-hmm. Another one, going back to the grief and loss. We hang stockings and I hang my mom's every year still. And my husband puts a single flower in it every Christmas Eve night.
Yeah.
And so when we wake up on Christmas and everyone else's stockings are full, hers is still there and it still has something for her in there. And I love that tradition.
Yeah. And that ritual or tradition, I think, is very important to help still honor and not let go and still feel close to those we've lost during this time. Because my mom's grandmother died on Christmas, right? So, I think for us and a lot of other people who have had close ones and loved ones pass away during this time really changed, I think, the perception of what it's about or what you want to do. But I love the idea of setting that tradition or some ritual to kind of keep them here with us in some sense.
And really, as partners in relationship, making sure we honor that. So as much as I hate it for my husband when he has to face that day, right?
Yeah.
Seeing what feels authentic for him and being super intentional in myself to every Christmas, try to remember that, try to give credence to his needs in that way. And that also invites people to be authentic in the holidays. So how do I say this? We almost have this forced joy sometimes for holidays where you have to be cheerful all the time and it has to be wonderful. And that sounds great. But for some people, that just isn't the case.
Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah. And this allows it creates room to have a multitude of emotions, to be both joyful and sorrowful and angry or whatever it might be. And I love that piece of it.
I think on a cultural level or in a society level, whoever or however you identify or whoever you identify with in that sense, I think the expectation by the cultures or our culture, society, however you identify with that, the expectation to always be cheerful and joyful. For those who aren't, it's almost like it exacerbates that a little bit because it's like maybe some guilt of, well, I'm not feeling that way. And I should, this keyword of should, right? We always talk about should not ourselves or should not everybody else, but that should of feeling this way. And then kind of this expectation getting put on there from the holidays of you should be cheerful makes it a little bit more difficult.
Isolating.
Yeah.
Incredibly isolating. We forget that not everyone has family to turn to. Not everyone has an abundantly full tree and all of the privileges that maybe, especially I know for me or you, might take for granted. As much as I try to be cognizant of those, there are families that they don't have those blessings present.
Yeah.
And if we're in a position where we are really blessed, can we give our time, our financial resources to a family that doesn't?
Yeah.
Can we even give, like I have some friends who struggle with isolation and that kind of thing. Can we give time in terms of texting them on Christmas or talking to them so that they at least talk to someone on the holiday?
Yeah. Trying to help with that loneliness, right? Giving that sense of socialization. And I think that goes back to kind of what I felt was important was setting your own tradition. It doesn't even have to be related to the holidays.
No.
Go do something different. Make it your own if that's not something that makes you feel good because of previous loss or any other previous experiences. Maybe trauma happened during this time of year for you outside of loss, right? Setting your own tradition and trying to make a new memory and a new association with this time of year.
Giving yourself grace to do that and that it might be messy. It might ebb and flow, right? What feels good for our family this year may not next year.
Yeah. That's where that discussion is going to be important. I think everything we talk about is going to be like, this needs to be
talked about. Our poor partners. All we do is talk about everything. But it's important. When we talk about with our podcast, the goal is to really talk about relationships and what makes them healthy and how to demystify the process of that. At the core of that for me is communication and boundaries.
Yeah.
And whether it's talking about the holidays or something else, that's going to be, I think, a ringing theme through all of our conversations because it's so important.
Yeah. Most of the other stuff doesn't happen unless you can talk about it, right?
Truth.
Oh, intimacy. You need to talk about it.
What? No.
Parenting expectations. There needs to be a conversation.
Unless you're a perfect parent like myself,
Yeah. So you've probably never had to talk about this at all.
Not at all. No.
I do want to come back to the idea of grief. Because in this, time that we're discussing, I don't want us to only focus on joy and that stuff. And we've brought up grief a few times now. What are some things that you would suggest for those who are feeling lonely?
Good question. So some things that I have shared with clients or do in our household is if you're the one that's feeling lonely, encouraging you to look at pictures or listen to music that feels good for your body. Also volunteering your time. So volunteering in a soup kitchen or another charity of your choice or something of the sort. Another piece is somewhat taking that risk of reaching out to someone, which is hard when you are lonely or feel like there's no one to reach out to. That can be a really big ask.
Yeah.
If you're on the blessed other side of it, acknowledging other people's pain. And for me, in totally only in my beliefs, right? But praying for them or sending them an encouraging message can be really impactful. I also try to be cognizant of, we had talked about gift giving, bringing a gift to someone that isn't just material. It isn't about the amount we spend, but that brings them a sense of connection.
Yeah.
Or a sense of someone else has thought about me. And that can be really impactful too.
Yeah. And I like a lot of what you're saying too, kind of leads to the idea of socialization, which I think is so important when you're feeling lonely, as much as we don't. And maybe even if we're experiencing some depressive symptoms, it kind of wants us to stay home alone, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't want us to go out, but getting out there, socializing, even if it's not related to the holidays, finding what your hobby is and going and engage in that, right? And maybe connecting with people through that. I mean, maybe even virtually. It doesn't have to necessarily be in person.
We take that for granted and we take connection for granted, but humans as a species are inherently social creatures.
Yeah.
And so when people say that they're okay being lonely, perhaps there's a small subset of people, but by and large, we need and crave social connection. I think that's why COVID was so hard for so many people.
Especially the extroverts like myself.
I was already doing the at-home thing, so it was great for me. But I think that was why it's so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And now we're going into the holidays where we're going to get a lot of connection, hopefully. And hopefully, again, kind of what we talked about, people are setting up these boundaries, expectations of what this is going to look like, so it can be less stressful and more enjoyable, and you can be more present instead of being distracted by these stressful thoughts or what it might be.
And when we can, incorporating play, joy, creativity, that part of our brain is
What does that look
crucial.
like for you, like play?
Ooh, so for us, for Christmas Eve, we started actually this year because I got it again from clients I've talked to, but we bought a board game and our biggest will open it this year because our littlest won't have any clue what's going on. But opening a board game every Christmas Eve to play as a family.
Not Monopoly, I hope.
No.
Okay.
I think this year it's Hungry Hungry Hippo. Taking it back to the 90s.
Like Operation.
But yeah, so doing a board game, cookies, a movie. For us too, we incorporate play into our gifts. So we've respectfully asked family not to just buy toys.
Yeah.
That would be our traditional way of thinking of play.
Yeah.
But instead think of play as, we want you, instead of just toys, also buying an experience or a book, but expanding that meaning of play and connection.
My favorite gift is an experience.
Love experiences. You even got one for our little girl for her birthday.
Yeah, the museum, right? The interactive museum. I just think it's more memorable. I don't know how many gifts I've gotten that were material, and I loved it at the time. 6 months down the road, it's like, I forgot that I was even given that, right? You think about what were you given, but those experiences we remember.
And kids cycle through toys like it's going out of style. It's 3 minutes and next one.
But then the family members are like, oh, I think their aunt's going to give them this. I need to get it something bigger.
So having that can be really helpful. It also honors for people who aren't as financially well off, being able to not feel really crummy about that and can give in the way that they can give their time.
Yeah.
Or reading a book or whatever it might be.
And I love the idea of play, because I think that
Mm-hmm.
fits really well into establishing your own tradition
Mm-hmm.
ritual, right? Because that game could easily be a new tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Every year we watch Christmas Vacation and play a game or whatever it might be.
I've never seen Christmas Vacation. I know many
no
viewers
words.
are shaking their heads right now, but
No words.
yeah, so my husband says too.
No words.
But he's never turned it on. So I'm like,
I will say though, my dad would really be upset with me because I was watching Big Bang, and Leonard
I've heard of it, never
was
seen
a
it.
famous
Mhm.
child actor who was the son on Home Alone, or not Home Alone. Sorry. Wow. I'm going to be in more trouble. Christmas Vacation. And I was like, to my wife, I was like, what did he play on? And I had to look it up. I was like, I'm so glad my dad's not here.
You violated your Christmas tradition here.
I did it now too. I said Home Alone. My God.
Get it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
What about for you guys? How do you incorporate play into your holidays?
we don't. We just do anything. We don't do anything. I'm just kidding. I mean, the hike is play for us.
Yeah.
We go to the outdoors. Outdoors is very much our playground.
Love that.
Yeah. So we camp and we do those things, not during Christmas, of course, because it's really,
It's a little chilly.
yeah.
Except for this year.
We're not that extreme.
It's basically summer still. So
Yeah, we're not that extreme, but the hike, getting out in nature. And when we're out there, we love to do like even mindfulness stuff,
Mhm.
right? Like what are things you see? And we try to play a game with each other of name like 2 things you smell, or just to really be
Mhm.
present instead of in our heads about, the holidays or whatever else might be going on at that time,
Mhm.
but to really, really embrace what we're doing. And I think that made a huge difference in our experience.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I think that highlights just the differences in the way we do holidays, right? Is you can find what feels good for your family, and it may not look anything like the people around you, and that is okay.
Yeah.
At the core of healthy relationships is a sense of mutuality. It's a sense of fulfillment.
Hmm.
And what might fulfill me is going to look different than what might fulfill you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you
Embracing
hope that there's some independence in that for families is it doesn't have to look like the Joneses, right?
Mhm.
We don't have to keep up with them.
Mhm.
Like, what do you want to pass down? What do you want to share? What do you
Mhm.
want to experience? And hopefully, there is some sense of ownership in that to make it more meaningful to them, rather than we just did this because this is what everyone's doing.
And enjoying the holidays through that.
Mhm.
If I have to do what everyone else has done my whole life, I probably am not going to enjoy this very much. And that
Yeah.
then makes me grouchy with my partner, with my children, with myself.
Mhm.
It's definitely not in service to my relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. Any last minute stuff before we kind of wrap
No,
this up?
I love that we're having this conversation, because much like sex or any other topic, we keep it pretty surface
Yeah.
in our culture of, we don't talk about these things. We just assume everyone knows how to relate well, how to do holidays well, how to do all the things well without actually talking about it. And so
Yeah.
I'm just grateful we're here for this conversation.
Yeah. And I think some of the key points that we brought up are boundaries, the communication, setting your own traditions, being just more conscientious around those who experience loss, and seeing what they need and how you can be present to help them through this process as well.
Yeah. And as always, if anyone has any questions, put it in the comments. Feel free to send us an email, and we'd be happy to help support you and your loved ones to have the best holiday you can.
All right. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you for another episode.
Sounds good.